Now, sometimes we need to be reminded about where our story begins, what grounds us, where we can return to, what sets the course for everything that we do. Now, Moses reminds Israel, which, as we know, is a precursor to the church, that God made everything, that everything belongs to God, and that God shares everything with us. So our defining story begins with the truth that the earth is abundant, that there is enough for everyone. But if we start our story from a place of scarcity, that there isn't enough to go around, that takes us somewhere else. So then Moses links this grounding story, this understanding of who God is, to economics and justice when he refers back to society's most vulnerable or least desirable. We're being reminded that we belong to one another, which means that justice, which, mind you, is a word that is interchangeable with the word righteousness in the scriptures, justice is about making sure that everyone is looked after, no matter who, which, if you believe the story of God's abundance, that leads us to protecting those who cannot protect themselves and sends us on a path of championing God's peace. But if we buy into the story of scarcity, we end up focusing our energies on protecting ourselves and protecting what we have. So maybe the question for us here, right off the top, is just that. What am I protecting? What is behind my front? What is my understanding of the world? What's the thing behind the thing? What energies animate me? What is it that motivates me? Is it abundance, justice, peace? Or is it fear, scarcity, and revenge? Centuries after Moses came King Solomon. And by that time, things had changed considerably for the people of Israel, so much so that they had completely lost the plot of their grounding story. So let's pick things up in the book of 1 Kings. Here's the account of the forced labor King Solomon conscripted to build the Lord's temple, his own palace, the terraces, the wall of Jerusalem, and Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had attacked and captured Gezer. He had set it on fire. He killed its Canaanite inhabitants and then gave it as a wedding gift to his daughter, Solomon's wife. And Solomon rebuilt Gezer. He built up Lower Beth Horon, Baalath, and Tadmor in the desert within his land, as well as all his store cities and the towns for his chariots and for his horses, whatever he desired to build in Jerusalem, in Lebanon, and throughout all the territory he ruled. There were still people left from the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Those peoples were non-Israelites. Solomon conscripted the descendants of all these peoples remaining in the land, whom the Israelites could not exterminate, to serve as slave labor, as it is to this day. Solomon accumulated chariots and horses. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horses, which he kept in the chariot cities and also with him in Jerusalem. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar as plentiful as sycamore fig trees in the foothills. Solomon's horses were imported from Egypt and from Kue. The royal merchants purchased them from Kue at the current price. They imported a chariot from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver and a horse for 150. They also exported them to all the kings of the Hittites and of the Arameans. Have you ever read that passage? Come on, don't lie to me. Be honest. Even if you have read it, you've probably read it like I read those parts of the Bible. Just skip past all the names and the places of people because who cares? Why bother with all those details? Well, I'm here to tell you that it's all in the details. Allow me to quickly summarize those details for you. Solomon. Solomon employs slave labor. Solomon has established strategic bases for war. Solomon has accumulated massive amounts of weaponry. Solomon is building a wall around his hometown. Solomon is making money hand over fist through his military exploits. Now let's unpack that a little bit further. The slaves that Solomon is using are the descendants of people groups that had historically mistreated the Israelites. So that whole thing's about revenge. And what about the cities mentioned, in particular Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer? Those places are military bases that once belonged to Egypt. Interesting. And he got them as a wedding gift for marrying one of Pharaoh's daughters. Of course, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure that I received a pretty good toaster as a wedding gift when I got married, but nobody gave me an army base. So, what do we have here then? What we have here is a military alliance. And the daughter or wife, she's chattel. That's just currency. Now, think about Solomon's 900 plus wives. Is he really frisky? Or is he creating a network of military alliances? Oh, and he's building a wall around his hometown. That sounds oddly familiar. What are walls for? To protect what's on the inside from those on the outside. So Solomon is stockpiling, selfishly hoarding his abundance, his surplus. Plus, he's also building store cities. That's right, whole cities dedicated to storing his excess. And what about all those horses and chariots? What are horses and chariots in ancient civilizations? They're tanks. They're vehicles of war. And so he's stockpiling those, but also he has so many that he's selling them too. So what do we call someone who imports and exports implements of war? You know, an arms dealer. Oh boy. All of that is going so well for him that the story says that Solomon made silver as common as stones. The dude is getting rich off of war. And again, I feel like I've heard all of that before. So do you see where this is going? Solomon has completely lost the plot of his grounding story. I mean, literally lost it at every single step. Let me show you how by going back to Deuteronomy for a hot minute here. Listen to what God said through Moses as part of the recap to the Israelites centuries earlier. This is going to blow your mind. Check it out. The king, moreover, must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself or make the people return to Egypt to get more of them. For the Lord has told you, you are not to go back that way again. He must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. And he must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. Are you catching this? Appoint judges and officials for each of your tribes and every town the Lord your God has given you, and they shall judge the people fairly. Do not pervert justice or show partiality. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the innocent. Follow justice and justice alone, so you may live and possess the land the Lord your God is giving you. Talk about losing the plot. Solomon did the exact opposite of everything God commanded. So in summary, God is saying, when you reorder yourselves as a society, do not reorder yourselves like Egypt. But that's what Solomon did. So Solomon is the new Pharaoh, it seems. So where does that leave you and me? How do we firmly hold on to the plot and not go back that old way again? 2 words for you: baptism and Eucharist. Here's what I mean. Baptism marks the beginning of the Christian life and therefore determines the whole of it. The Lord's Supper, whose reiterated celebration enacts ritually what lies at the very heart of the Christian life. Baptism is an identification with the death of Christ. Crucified with Christ through baptism, Christians live by faith in the Son of God who loved them and gave himself for them. At the Lord's Supper, Christians remember the one who gave his body for them so that they could be shaped in his image. So if the plot is that God is good and that God shares all that is good with us, then baptism and Eucharist are a reminder and an energizer of the best story ever. Baptism reminds us to be like Jesus, that is, to identify with the victims of violence, to struggle alongside them in solidarity, to know them, to understand their plight, and to feel it. In baptism, we die to ourselves, and in it we remember the sufferings of Jesus on the cross aren't just his sufferings, they're the sufferings of the poor and weak, and Jesus shares himself in solidarity with them. So baptism is our reminder to do the same. But it doesn't stop there. The Eucharist energizes us to be like Jesus in our efforts to work for renewal and liberation for the perpetrators of violence. That's right, everyone. The healing work of Jesus is for the oppressed and their oppressors. It has to be a win-win for slaves and for Solomons. And that's how we begin to wage peace. As disciples of the crucified, we live peacefully in a violent world.